My name is Rowan Ellis, I'm 26 years old, and what I'm about to tell you is the reason. I haven't slept in almost 13 nights, not without hearing voices under my bed whispering things I've never said out loud in accents I don't recognize, and tones that sound exactly like mine. Please, if you're watching this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share this story with someone who's ever lived in a place that just felt wrong the moment you walked in, because you need to. Hear what happened to me all the way to the end. I moved to Portland 2 months ago for a temp position, graphic design for a startup that ghosted me halfway through onboarding. I was broke, living on caffeine and Craigslist listings, until I found this weird ad. Quiet room for rent, no pets, no noise, no mirrors. It was cheap, like suspiciously cheap, but I was desperate, so I didn't ask questions. The building was an old converted motel, 3 stories tall, brick crumbling at the edges. My room was 209, no key card, just a thick iron key on a red tag that said, "Do not duplicate." First night felt okay, a little cold. The windows wouldn't open and there were no outlets near the bed, which annoyed me, but then I fell asleep, and at exactly 3:12 a.m. I heard it, whispers, layered voices, like a dozen people speaking beneath the floorboards, saying things that didn't make sense at first until one of them used my name. "Rowan," they hissed, not loud, not threatening, almost like a reminder. I sat up, heart racing. The room was empty. No one in the hallway. I even checked under the bed. Nothing. I convinced myself it was a dream. But the next night it happened again, 3:12 a.m. on the dot, and this time they said something different. "He doesn't know what we buried." That line haunts me more than the voice itself. I'm telling this now because something is changing in the room. I see cracks on the ceiling that weren't there before. My socks go missing and reappear wet. The faucet turns itself on when I sleep, but nothing comes out, just the sound of digging. Something is underneath room 209, and I'm starting to think the last person who lived here didn't leave by choice. I didn't plan to pull the dresser away from the wall, not until the 3rd night, when I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, and convinced I'd heard breathing behind me, even though I sleep alone. And when I turned on the light, the air smelled sharp and metallic, like old pennies soaked in vinegar, and that's when I saw it. The faint outline of a square vent behind the dresser, sealed with rotted wood and painted over like someone didn't want it ever opened again. Something about it made my stomach turn, like my body already knew what my brain didn't want to process, but I moved the dresser anyway, scraping deep gouges into the floor, and used a screwdriver to pry off the cover, and what I found behind it was not a ventilation duct. It was a crawl space no more than 2 feet high, dusty and thick with cobwebs, but there was movement inside, slow, deliberate, shifting like someone turning over in their sleep, and I should have stopped there, but I didn't. I shined my flashlight in and saw something pale and paper thin wedged deep in the corner. I reached in and grabbed it, a folded photograph, black and white, curled at the edges. It showed a woman sitting in a chair in this exact room, room 209, with her back to the wall and a mirror reflecting her face, except in the mirror she wasn't alone. There were figures behind her, blurred and shadowy, reaching out from under the bed. My hands trembled as I turned the photo over. Written in faded pen was one line: "Don't speak to them or they'll speak back." I backed away, heart in my throat, and that's when I heard the vent whisper, a low voice inches from my ear, saying, "You found it, now we see you." I slapped the vent cover back in place and shoved the dresser against it, but I knew something had changed that night at exactly 3:12 a.m. The whispers didn't come from under the bed. They came from inside the wall, closer, clearer. They whispered not just my name, but my memories. They told me things I never told anyone, and worst of all, they started to finish my thoughts before I could. This room isn't haunted, it's inhabited. And I think it's been waiting for someone exactly like me after the 5th night of hearing whispers that now answered questions I hadn't even asked. I knew I couldn't just keep hiding behind the dresser or duct taping vents. I needed answers, real ones, and the landlord sure as hell wasn't going to give them, especially considering that every time I asked about room 209, she blinked like she'd never heard of it, even though she gave me the key herself. So I walked to the local planning office under the pretense of researching the building's history for renovation, and after a bored clerk scrolled through dusty PDFs of floor plans from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, he handed me a blueprint of the 3rd floor from 1989, but there was no room 209. The layout jumped from 208 straight to 210, like a hole had been cut from reality itself. And when I pointed this out, the guy shrugged and said, "That whole part of the building was condemned at one point. Maybe someone walled it in and forgot to update the lease records." Which made 0 sense because I'm living there now and it's listed in the system, so why does the city act like it doesn't exist? I went deeper: newspaper archives, zoning complaints, even an obscure Reddit thread from a user in 2014 who mentioned staying in a Portland motel room where voices knew my name in dreams, and his username? 209 left alone. That thread had 2 comments. One said, "Don't reply to them, it counts as consent." The other was deleted. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, even unplugged my phone, turned off Wi-Fi, but the voices just laughed and said, "You're still connected to us even in silence." I finally cornered one of the older maintenance guys in the stairwell, an ex-carpenter who'd been working there since the foundation shook in '97, and when I said I was in 209, his eyes clouded, not just with fear, with recognition. "That room should have stayed sealed," he whispered. "The last time someone opened the wall, the voices got out. They don't like being quieted." When I asked what they were, he didn't answer, just pointed to the side of his neck where an ugly, jagged scar twisted like a burn, and said, "They don't whisper to hurt you. They whisper to replace you." Now I leave the light on when I sleep, but I don't know how much longer that'll work, because last night they stopped whispering and they started humming the kind of lullaby you only hear when something's about to slip into your skin. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. I finally decided to record them, not because I thought anyone would believe me, but because I needed proof, even if it was just for me. So I set up an old digital recorder on my nightstand, pressed record at 2:55 a.m. and laid back in bed staring at the ceiling, pretending to sleep while gripping the edge of the blanket like a lifeline. And just like every other night, the whispers came at 3:12 a.m. sharp, but this time they weren't just random names or cryptic sentences. They were having a conversation in my voice, like fragments of myself arguing with echoes I never made, and I kept still, heart pounding in my chest, until the room finally went silent again. Then I reached for the recorder, hands shaking, hit stop, and spent the next hours staring at it like it might bite before I finally pressed play. And that's when my blood ran cold, because I didn't hear what I'd just experienced. I heard something else entirely. The voices weren't whispers anymore. They were full sentences, clear and trembling, and the worst part? It was me, not just my voice, my tone, my breath, the panic in my throat saying, "Please don't open the door. Please, Rowan. If you do, they'll know you let them in last time. Don't repeat it. You're not ready again." Again, the word echoed like a hammer again. I scrubbed it through the recording, trying to find a rational explanation, thinking maybe I had recorded something from a podcast or phone call by mistake, but the file's metadata said it was made entirely in silence except for that single 3-minute timestamp, which means the message came from inside the room, or worse, inside the crawl space. The next morning I tried playing it for someone at a local audio repair shop, but as soon as I clicked play, all that came out was static, except for one brief second when the clerk leaned in and recoiled. "What the hell was that?" he asked. I told him I didn't know, but I lied. I recognized the voice. It was me warning myself, which means this isn't just some haunting, it's a cycle, a loop I've lived through before, one that resets every time I open that door, and I think I'm the only one who ever remembers. I should have left packed up, thrown the key into the nearest drain, disappeared into some nameless town, and never spoken of room 209 again. But when you've seen a version of yourself beg not to repeat something you haven't done yet, walking away stops feeling like escape and starts feeling like betrayal. So the next night, I did what I swore I wouldn't. I opened the closet door all the way and peeled back the warped drywall behind a loose panel, and sure enough, there it was, a second door, old, rotted, sealed with layers of paint and nails, but I hacked through it with the claw end of a hammer until it gave way, revealing a narrow hidden space behind the wall, cold as a walk-in freezer and lined entirely with mirrors not hanging, built into the walls, floor to ceiling, all facing inwards, so no matter where I turned I saw myself staring back. Except they weren't quite right. One blinked when I didn't. Another turned its head a second after I did. One stood completely still. Even when I waved my arms, I stepped into the mirrored room, against every instinct, against the voice in my head that now sounded like the one from the recorder, and the door shut behind me. Hard, no handle on the inside, just me. And then one of the reflections smiled, only one. The rest mimicked me, frozen in panic, but the one directly across from me stepped forward. Even though I hadn't moved, tilted its head and whispered without sound, lips moving slowly, but I heard nothing until I looked down. Written in condensation on the mirror at my feet were the words, "We all made the same mistake." I backed up. My breath fogged the glass behind me. That one didn't, the smiling one, and when I closed my eyes for half a second trying To breathe, I heard it not in my ears, but in my skull vibrating like a frequency only fear could decode. You opened the loop again, but you're closer now, you remember more. When I opened my eyes, every reflection had changed. They weren't wearing my clothes anymore, weren't blinking at all. They were just watching, and I realized this wasn't a mirror room, it was a prison, and I'd just given them another crack in the glass eye. Didn't sleep the night I escaped the mirror room. Not because I couldn't, but because I was terrified. I'd wake up inside it, staring at my own back from the other side of the glass. So I stayed up pacing until I noticed one of the floorboards near the window was slightly lifted, and when I pried it up, something fell out, a leather-bound journal, old and damp, its edges chewed by time or rats or both, and when I opened it, my throat dried instantly. The first page was addressed to the next Rowan Ellis. It wasn't typed, it wasn't printed. It was handwritten, but the handwriting changed every few pages, slanted neat, shaky, blocky, like it had been written by different versions of the same person. Neat page after page detailed the same events, voices at 3:12 and the whispers from the walls. The sealed vent, the mirror behind the closet, but each version remembered something new, an extra room, a different face in the mirror. One even mentioned a mirror baby that crawled out once and tried to switch places during a dream. I read the entries until my hands went numb, and on the final page, written in red ink, it said, "You made it farther than the last 5. That means the reset is weakening. If you want to end this, don't escape, finish it." My head was spinning. I'd thought maybe I was being haunted, stalked, or placed, but what if the truth was worse? What if I'm part of the haunting? What if room 209 isn't a room, but a checkpoint in a cycle I failed to complete over and over again? One final line in the back cover chilled me more than anything. They can't create another version until you're erased. I shut the journal, heart hammering. That meant something was trying to overwrite me slowly, completely. I looked in the mirror across the room. My reflection was smiling. I wasn't be the 7th night. I stopped waiting for the whispers because they didn't need a time anymore. They had synchronized with me breathing, when I breath twitching, when I twitched, and I could feel them getting bolder, feeding off my decisions, my hesitation, my fear. So I stopped running, stopped checking the vents, and walked back into the mirror room with one purpose: to end this, whatever this was once and for all. I brought the journal. I brought a hammer, and I brought a printed photo of myself, a real one from before I moved in, taken by my sister at a cafe in Chicago. It was the last piece of proof that I'd existed outside room 209. I laid it at the foot of the largest mirror and whispered, "If I'm the last version, then I choose to end it." The mirrors didn't move, didn't shift. They just reflected a dozen of me, 100, 1,000, all slightly wrong in ways I can't explain. One was blinking too slowly, one was mouthing my words just after I said them, one had no pupils. I gripped the hammer and stared at the one that always smiled. "You don't get to restart," I said. "Not this time." And I swung the glass, shattered like ice under pressure, screaming as it splintered, but not out loud in my mind. 1,000 voices unspooling at once, names, memories, choices, regrets, lives I don't remember living but feel in my bones. I kept swinging until the mirror was dust, until the wall behind it cracked and revealed nothing, just darkness, a cold void that sucked air and light and memory from the room. I dropped the hammer. The silence was heavy, too heavy. When I woke up, I was in a hospital again. No ID, no phone, just a nurse asking, "Do you know your name?" I opened my mouth to speak and paused. Rowan Ellis, that's who I was, right? But why didn't it feel real? Why did the name taste like someone else's story? That night, as I stared at the ceiling of my new room, I swore I saw a flicker of movement in the vent above me, and then at exactly 3:12 a.m. a voice whispered, "You erased us. But not you." I don't know if I escaped, I don't know if I won. All I know is the loop didn't end, it just restarted somewhere else. Thanks for watching this full psychological horror experience. If this story twisted your thoughts or made you question your own reflection, don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and share the story with someone who's ever looked in the mirror and felt off. Comment below, have you ever lived somewhere that felt like it was watching you?